What's up, YouTube? Waiting on Instagram.
You're live on Instagram.
All right, beautiful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here at Mason Denton. That's right, right, Mason?
Yep,
Said it
Mason
right?
Denton. How's it going,
All right,
guys?
beautiful. All right, so obviously, shears are one of the largest expenses we have as a stylist, and it's probably one of the hardest things to really understand. Like, are you wasting $1,000 on a pair of shears that you can probably get the same exact pair that does the same thing for $100? Is there a difference? Is there not a difference? And then what happens when you get them? Where do you get them sharpened? Should you send them out to somebody? Is this guy with, who shows up with a truck to your salon? Is that the best person to sharpen your shears that you spend $1,000 on? So I got Mason here. Mason's out of Boise, Idaho, and his mom's actually in our program, and she told me that you sell shears and you sharpen them, because I was looking for a sharpener as well. And then me and him started talking. His knowledge blew me away. So I want to talk a little bit about like how you actually got into sharpening shears, because there's so many different areas in our industry that people can like lean into.
Right.
But this is something that, that you just kind of hopped into not long ago, and you really fast tracked your career, sharpening shears.
Yeah, no, shear sharpening is not a career that someone picks, right? It's not oh, I want to be a shear sharpener, right? When I grow up, that's not usually how it works. So starting out, I have gone to trade school for CNC machining. It's a manufacturing process that you'd be very surprised. Almost, every metal product has some type of CNC machining on it. A big example is gun manufacturing. Guns are CNC machined, right? You take a block of steel or aluminum and you cut it and program a machine to cut it into a certain shape, right? Even a lot of shears actually have some CNC machining processes on them. So I've been doing that for about 4 years. And it's been a pretty good career, but I also grew up in a salon. So, my mom has had a salon for almost 15 years, I think. So, when I was a kid, I grew up cleaning the salon. I grew up around hairstylists. And, a couple years ago, my mom was really pushing me. She was like, you should become a shear sharpener. And I don't think I was responsible enough to take on a business for myself when I was 19. But as I've gotten older and I'm through the hustle and bustle and the hourly wage stuff as a tradesman, I saw it as a way out to give me some more freedom. And so with my machining background, I picked it up pretty quick. So I am self-taught as a shear sharpener, which can be scary, right? Because you're just talking about $1,000 shear, right?
Yeah.
People spend a lot of money on their shears, and their tools are really, really important, right? But I've started out, going door to door, not mobile. I pick up your shears, I drop them off, a 24-hour turnaround with a 30-day guarantee, right? And it's really grown. There's not a lot of competition, right? Because every single hairstylist or barber has been burned by a shear sharpener. So I'd say the hardest thing to get is building trust with your customers, right?
So this is a great segue in, because stylists who just start doing hair have the same kind of problem.
Right.
Like, nobody trusts them yet.
Sure.
All your friends had that one friend that cuts hair, and then they went to them, and they got a bad haircut or a bad color. And so when you're building a business, whether it's cutting someone's hair or sharpening your shears, the fundamentals are the same.
Yeah, of course.
Just knocking on doors is what people need to do, and people forget that.
Yeah,
you've awesome that you did that.
Yeah, you've got to have grit, right? I mean, the first couple of times I went door to door, I was super nervous. I got the door shut in my face, and over time, it gets much better, right? Over time, when you get, it's a numbers game. So how many no's do I have to get before I get a yes, right? So does it take 10 shops to go to for a no to get one yes? And
do you follow Jeremy Miner at all?
I don't.
Write his name down, Jeremy Miner. Jeremy Miner invented NEPQ selling.
Okay.
Neuroemotional position selling, or
sure.
Questioning. I'm sorry, neuroemotional position questioning. I think that's what it stands for. And so when you get a no, right, there's certain ways to ask questions to understand what they're saying no to.
Right.
And you can get someone to say yes based on how you actually start asking questions. So
Sure.
whether you're selling extensions or shears, you'll probably love the guy. He's great. There's a lot of good salesmen out there, like sales trainers, but his way of questioning, especially for us, because like I said before, I don't just want to give my shears to anybody.
Right.
You
Right.
know. So how do you prove yourself or gain that trust
So
now?
what I did originally, and if you're a good sharpener, right? So I've really been the first like sharpener, and I have some good ties in the community now. But I was really the first sharpener to guarantee my work for 30 days openly, right? Which 99.9% of the time, it doesn't, guaranteeing my work doesn't matter because I do good work, right? So, assuring customers that I promise you, no matter what, even if I get it wrong, I'm going to make it right. And then another thing I do is I do, the first shear in that salon for free. So I'd go, hey, look, just let me take one shear. I don't care if it's a one you never use or whatever it might be. Just let me sharpen that one to build some trust. Give me one shear. I'll do it for free. You get to try it out and use the shear after it's sharpened, and we can go from there. I think with stylists, being really personable, which is something sharpeners really struggle at, because like I said, it's not a career that like someone really wants to get into. So there's a lot of weird, awkward people in the business.
100%.
Right. And
It's
and
always
so
some dude in a white van pulling up with like some weird haircut
yep. No,
saying, "Hey, give me your $1,000 shears," and
it
disappear
really is.
into the parking lot.
And yeah, no, of course. So you've got some really introverted people, and there's, like I said, there's not a whole lot of competition too, so your pickings are slim, right? As a stylist or a barber, you don't have much of a choice locally who you're going to have your shears sharpened by. Maybe there's only one guy in your area that does it, and even if he doesn't do a very good job, most stylists and barbers don't want to ship their shears out, right? Because it's a headache. It's okay. Do
Well,
I
the
have a
post
spare?
office sucks too. It's like, is it really going to even get there half the
Yeah,
time? If
right.
that's what you're worried about.
There, how long is it going to take for them to get it back to me, right? Is it going to get lost in transit? Is my shear even going to work when I get it back, right? Because you could have some guy sharpen it that you shipped your shear off to, and then now your shear's even worse off, and do you want to ship it out again, even though hopefully the sharpener picks up the cost for it, right? It's just, that's something you really have to be pay attention to, and it's a hard deal. So having a good local guy, and you've been talking about a van a lot, right? And um, there's a and my mom is the same exact way. She's never let someone in a van sharpen her shears. She was trained by Rusk a long time ago, and that was some of the things that they said: do not let a mobile sharpener sharpen your shears.
Well, I
Because
had a guy
yep.
years ago. Like I started doing hair in '97. He was already older. His son took over for him. His name was Pasquale, old Italian guy. He had a white van.
Right.
And then his son took it over. He had obviously a bigger van after that. And that's why it popped in my head. But then I've always trusted him because he just did everybody in our industry in my area. Like
Sure.
anyone who's older than like 35, probably in the North New Jersey area, knows Pasquale
Right.
or knew of
Right.
Pasquale.
Right. And it's not about the van or not, because it's
Yeah.
really about the craftsmanship and the work. I
Yeah.
can fit all my tooling and equipment into a van and do great work, right? But since there's such a low threshold for
Mhm.
quality in this business, most people are mobile, and so it's not even a correlation, right? A guy in a van does a worse job than a guy that doesn't, but it's just everybody's been burned, and so they connect the dots to a mobile sharpener, right? Because a mobile sharpener is the guy who jacked up their shears, so they're never going to use someone in a van again. The way that I do it, because I sell shears as well, and I've carried a few different brands now, but I run around with a little mobile toolbox that individually puts shears in with a name tag and all their information, and I pick the shears up and then I drop them off the next day. So it's a 24-hour turnaround, and you guys get the shears that I sell. You guys get to use them for the time being. So you're
Nice.
not go without shears. It's a great way for me to get the shears I sell into people's hands right? So they get to use them, and if they really like them, then they're more than welcome to buy them. So that works really good instead of the I like being in my own space too. I like having time, even if I have to sharpen till 2 in the morning in my garage, right? I like the space, and if I'm out on in the field, I have a time crunch, right? Also, I really don't want a stylist to know how quick it takes me to sharpen a shear, because I'll be honest, it takes me about, on a just a typical shear, right? It takes me about 20 minutes a shear, give or take. Some shears take me an hour, right? Because they're giving me headaches.
Yeah.
But that can actually bring up questions, right? Hey, why did it take so, why was it so short to sharpen my shear?
Because I'm
And
that good.
yeah, right, right. And part of that is, okay, I've done probably 1,000 shears now, right? So it's muscle memory for me. It doesn't take me too long to do it, but I don't want to get 5 shears and then come back to them in an hour and be like, oh, here's your shears. I'm like, oh, why did it only take you an hour to do, right? And you're charging me this amount. The reason shears can be you can charge more for beauty shears, because I sharpen knives too, and the money just isn't there. I could charge $10 a shear or $10 a knife, right? But a beauty shear, some people pay upwards of $60 a shear. Now, my prices aren't that much, and I do pricing off quantity, but a shear is a lot more complicated than a knife. A knife has a bevel and it's polished, and that's it.
Yeah,
A
the shears to be balanced, right?
Yep, a shear has a ride line on the inside blade. It has the face that's fully convex instead of beveled for the most part. You've got the set in the shear, which is actually the curve of the shear, and that's how they make contact with each other. You have to put a burr on the edge. You have to polish it. You have to check the ride line and use a whetstone to bring back the ride line. Sometimes you have to hammer the shear to put more bend into it, because they'll come out of alignment and then the shears aren't making contact and they're not going to cut hair. They're going to fold hair.
So if you drop a pair of shears,
Yep.
a lot of times they're shot. Is it
Sure.
really difficult to fix, like to hammer back in a pair of shears? Like
So
once you drop them, are they done on a hard fall? Maybe.
depends on the shear. If you have a high quality forged shear, it's not super complicated. It's not anything crazy to rebend the shear back into place. Most of the time, when you drop a shear, you're not going to bend it. You're going to nick it, right? But you're not going to bend it. However, 20% of the time you drop it and you bend it, right? And then it's gonna completely fold hair. It's just not gonna cut. With the nicks, a thing that's interesting is, you as just using your shears, you're gonna get a bunch of micro nicks on the edge because the edge is so fine. And as long as the nick is smaller than the hair that you're cutting, you're not gonna run into any issues. So like, a good way to check for nicks is you actually run your fingernail along the edge, because you're not going to cut your fingernail, and you'll feel if you have bigger nicks, your thumb will catch, right? It'll catch on the shear, or you can feel it when you open and close the shear. But so usually when you drop them, the reason that they nick is because the edges, if the shear's open and you drop it and it shocks it pushes the two edges together and then tries to close super fast. So it's like a little shock, and that's why you can also bend the shear. Very rarely I see it, but it does happen where the shear is going to get bent from just doing that. It takes a lot usually, but that's why also, when you set your shears down, a part of maintenance is you want to make sure they're closed all the way before you set them down. Because if the shear is open like this and it's laying flat, right, you're putting a lot of force on the edge where it's touching, at the tip of the V on both edges, and you can nick your shears just by setting them down with the shear open. Um,
I don't know
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I get on my mom all the time. I'm like, you need to close your shears, and because most stylists, it's really sad. Stylists and barbers aren't educated on their tools. Like, a mechanic, they nerd out about their tools, right? They know everything. They buy a lot more tools than you guys, but they know almost everything about the tools that they buy. right? And with the sharpening community being so introverted and almost me, my business, trade secret, right? There's not a lot of education on your shears. And when you're spending $1,000 on, you should damn well know what, what the anatomy of that shear is, how it works, right? Instead of, most of the time you guys just want to cut hair and that's it,
Let
right?
me
You
ask
don't.
you a question about cutting hair. So I'm a dry cutter. Typically, I cut most of my haircuts all dry.
Yep.
Wet versus dry. Is dry that much more damaging to the hair? Or
Yes.
yeah?
So it's not damaging to the hair, it's
I'm
damaging.
sorry, not damaging the shears. I mean, yeah,
Yep.
damaging the shears.
Yes, it's much more damaging to the shear. I was actually just talking to a girl who's using a pair of shears that I gave her. She had a shark fin and a Hanzo, and they're more a wet style shear, but she cuts a lot dry. So every 3 months or so, she needed to get them resharpened. They had been damaged by a sharpener before too, so there's a lot going on, a lot of aspects going on with the shears. But dry hair is abrasive. So it's got, you feel your hair dry and you feel it wet, right? You can tell obviously when it's wet, it's a lot softer. So it's like sanding abrasives, right? So maybe wet hair is like a 400 grit and or a 600 grit, and dry hair is more, especially coarse dry hair, that's more like a 120 grit or an 80 grit, right? And so it is definitely a lot harder on the shear. I always recommend, if you do a lot of dry cutting, is use a dry cutter. So what kind
What
of
makes
shear?
a dry cutter a dry cutter?
So what makes dry cutter a dry cutter, and I'll show you for as an example. So this is just a wet and dry cutter, and it's more so it's got a thinner blade, right? It's got a thinner blade. Just kind of your typical shear, right? And this is a good hybrid wet and dry. This shear is probably more towards dry cutting too, compared to like a lot of shears out there.
What
Um,
makes that more towards dry though? Like if I'm a stylist and some guy comes in with a bag of shears or like those envelopes of shears, what would I look for?
so I'm going to show you what
Ah,
my
cool.
dry shear looks like, and it's right here. So you'll see with a dry cutting shear, and here's the wet and dry, more so wet. But so you've got a lot bigger blade, right? You see how fat
Yeah.
that blade is compared to this kind of hybrid wet and dry shear. So this is a dry only. And the reason they make the blades so much fatter, right, and bigger and bulkier is because the more weight you have on the blade, the more power you have, cutting power you have. So it's got more material to it, making it a lot stronger, giving you a lot more power to actually cut hair. And same with the tips, right? On a dry cutter, the tips are a lot more rounded than your kind of sharp point.
Mhm.
And that's also, that also the same exact thing with more meat on the shear, the more life you're going to get out of the edge when you're dry cutting. So you have much more power behind your tool when the edge is a little bit meatier, a little bit bigger. So it's not going to be as hard on the shear when you're cutting dry hair.
All right,
Um,
so slide cutting,
yep.
like when you slide cut either wet or dry, there's
Right.
specific shears for that as well,
Yeah.
right?
So, and what's really cool about this dry cutter, and there's only one other shear that I've seen do this, and I don't know who copied who, or if it's just kind of a thing that's been going on for a while. But the Hanzo HH1 has this same style of edge, and so for slide cutting, a dry cutter is usually a lot sharper too. But you also, when a shear is sharper, you start to catch the hair when you're slide cutting instead of pushing the hair, right? And so what's so special about this dry cutter right here is you see the engraving
Yeah,
on it. So can you read it?
I can't. It's just
No?
it's
Okay.
out of focus, but
So on this side, it says sliding it has an arrow pointing down to the base of the shear. And on this side, this says cutting, right? And it goes from where my fingernail is all the way up. And so what's really cool and special about this shear is that for slide cutting, it's actually has an edge that's rolled over and over polished on the thumb blade. So the edge, instead of having a super fine sharp edge, 2/3 down to the base of the shear has an over polished edge, which rounds off the tip, creating a push when you're slide cutting. So
Cool.
because when you're actually slide cutting, right, if your shear is super sharp and it catches, right, you're going to just pull chunks out, right? It's not going to be that nice slither cut that you want where it's taken just a little off at a time. And then from 1/3 up to the tip, it's actually sharpened all the way. So you have really good point cutting. So
So
when
if
you're
I was a lefty, which I am, and I'm trying to
yeah,
slide cut with that particular shear, it wouldn't work as well for me
because you're
because
left,
it's
right?
because I have the scissor flipped in my hand.
Right. Yep. So you'd have the scissor flipped in your hand. And so what's different about left-handed shears versus regular or right-handed shears, not regular, but right-handed shears, is the blades are actually flipped. Okay. So this blade right here would actually be pointing this way, and the back blade would be pointing that way. So it's like it's like a mirror, right?
Yep.
So the blade is completely flip-flopped and mirrored. And the reason why, and some manufacturers have claimed to say they can make an ambidextrous shear, which I don't really think is true. I don't think that's really something you can do. A lot of, because you have such a limited left-handed stylists and barbers have such a limited quantity of shears they get to pick with. They'll actually teach themselves to have a neutral grip on the shear and cut with right-handed shears.
That's what I told myself. And then when I first got lefty shears, I went to clean my blade with my fingers and I
And you
sliced my thumb.
right, yep.
Yeah.
And I've done that too, sharpening left-handed shears. I just don't even think of it, and then yeah, I sliced myself pretty good. But the reason when you hold a shear, right, and your thumb, you want your thumb barely out of the hole, and you're kind of pushing your thumb this way, right, creating a little bit of thumb pressure. And since your fingers here are almost, your pinky when you have it on the tang is almost pulling into your hand, so you're pushing out with your thumb, pulling into your hand, and you don't even notice it because it's a natural thing with a scissor. And you don't need a super hard firm grip, pushing and pulling. But with the left-handed shear, since it's backwards, I'm holding a right-handed shear and my thumb is here and my fingers are here, I'm pushing my thumb blade into my finger blade, right, which is making contact at the V, right? And so a left-handed shear, since it's backwards, you're actually pushing the blades away from each other. And so it's going to fold hair. It's not making contact with each other. It's really hard to see. You're going to have a hard time seeing it over camera.
If you're a lefty, the first time we tried to use a lefty shear, you didn't like it. If you always used a righty shear your whole entire career.
Yep.
That's what happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've actually sold right-handed shears to people who are left-handed and they didn't even know, right? Just because they picked up a right-handed shear and started cutting with their left hand and have figured it out. And so now they have a different grip on the shear and they don't even want to use a left-handed shear because they're used to the right-handed shear and everything's good. There's no reason to change it up.
So in reality, when it comes to shears in general, like Hanzo's expensive. And Hanzo has, they're just marketing. Some people don't like them because of they don't use Japanese steel. They said they use Japanese steel, whatever the story is with them. But what makes the difference between a shear that's 150 and 850, like in reality?
So there's a couple variables, but we'll just start on Hanzo, okay? Just Hanzo, where Hanzo has really killed it, and I'm getting to a point here, is the guy who started Hanzo was a salesman, right? He wasn't a hairstylist, or I don't know if he had ties to the industry, but he was a straight cutthroat salesman, multi-level marketing guy. He killed it. And so they sell the hell out of shears. They're good at it. Everybody hates Hanzo, but they all have Hanzos, right? I mean, Hanzo is the number one shear I run across for the most part for well-aged stylists that want to invest in their tools. And they cost $1,000, right? And where you're paying for with Hanzo is you're paying for the brand and you're paying for the service. Now, where Hanzo is really dropping the ball is, like, at least in my area, every time I talk to someone about their Hanzos, I ask them, when's the last time a rep's been in to take care of you or pick up your shears for sharpening? And they go, it's been 3 years, right? And so that's where people are starting to get really frustrated with Hanzo, at least in my area, is they don't have anybody taking care of them, and they spent $3,000 on 3 shears, right? Now with Hanzo, they did, like you were talking about Japanese steel, and they end up getting sued for false advertising because their shears aren't actually made in Japan. They claimed it for a while, and so the way that it works with shear manufacturers, same with shark fin. Shark fin does the same exact thing as Hanzo does. Is what they'll do is and like, I don't know if you've seen the luxury bag war with the Chinese right now during the tariffs, but everything is forged in Japan. So they get the Japanese steel and they forge it into the shape of the shear, and then they ship it off to China or South Korea to hand finish the shear, because that's the most labor intensive part of making a shear. So there's high quality materials, right, coming from shark fin and Hanzo, but they're not technically made in Japan. They're forged in Japan and then assembled somewhere else. The first thing that I would say that makes the difference between a high quality shear and a low quality shear, and markups on shears are about the same as luxury bags. The markups are extraordinary. I'm not going to tell you how much they make a Hanzo for, but you would be shocked, right? Because it's an inside thing, and I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Yeah, I know it's like $20, something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous for $1,000 shear, right? And so like these shears that I carry, the above shears, right? They are made for the same price as Hanzo's, and I sell them. They sell online for about $400. So they're a really good middle of the road, budget friendly shear that I can promise you has the same quality, if not better, than Hanzo. But the first thing that's important when selecting a shear is whether or not it's casted or forged. So casting a shear is they have a mold of a shear, which a machinist would make, and then they pour molten hot metal into it and form the shape of a shear. Now, what casting is, it creates a low quality material because it's porous, so it's not as flexible. Especially once it's heat treated, it's very brittle. Okay. And the harder a material is, the more brittle it is as well. But so, like, if you were to bend a cast shear on accident, say you dropped it, I'm going to have a hell of a time trying to fix that shear. Every shear I broke, which is a very small amount, and they're always cheap shears that end up breaking, um, is they were a cast shear. So when you try and bend a cast shear, they're so brittle and porous, they're going to end up snapping. So, I would, if you want to spend money on a shear, please stay away from cast shears. Cast shears are usually made in Pakistan and whatnot too. Pakistan also has the most faked shear brands, like Joel's. They fake the hell out of Joel shears. Pakistan does. But the next thing, and so you want a forged shear. The difference between forged and cast is cast, you have molten metal going into the shape of a shear. Forged is you have a giant hydraulic hammer with the shape of a shear on the top and the bottom, and you get a orange hot piece of material, and the hammer hits it and forms the shape of it. So it's forged under a lot more pressure, and the metal is, if you overheat metal, it starts to lose its structural integrity. So a forged shear doesn't get heated to the of it becoming
liquid. Yeah.
right. So it's not as able to absorb impurities because it's not liquid, right? So it gets hit into the shape, right? And then they trim all the outside material, and then it ends up getting hand finished and ground and sharpened, and the hollow grind gets put in it after the fact. Same with the cast one, but the forged shear is a lot more malleable, and you don't want a shear that's super duper hard. And the reason why you don't want a shear that's super duper hard is because it becomes more brittle and the edge becomes more sensitive, and it has a tendency to chip more. So you want it hard, but you don't want it overly hard. You want it.
What's the grade of steel? Like, I see like the acronyms like CG1 or VG.
10. You got VG10.
Okay.
Have ATS36 cobalt, I believe. You have a couple different cobalt alloys, and you have 440 stainless steel. So like the difference and weight will play into it too. But like, if you're gonna get a shear, 440 stainless has been around for the longest. The Japanese invented it. It was what, sword katanas were made out of. The first guy to make a shear, a Japanese style shears, which is what everybody uses today, was actually a katana maker. He made swords, and then the Japanese created a ban on swords for their citizens. And so only the military could have them in like the 1860s. And so he went to shear manufacturing. So Japanese has a really cool history behind making shears, and it's why they kick everybody's ass at doing it. But so where I was going with that is
VG10.
Yep, 440 stainless is a great material. It's heavy, but it's easy. It's the cheapest and most readily available material to make a shear out of. But you can get a 440 stainless shear from $50 up to $500. So where you've got, I mean, there's a lot of aspects. You want to buy from a reputable brand. Like I think did you have Matsui's?
Matsuzaki's or Matsui's?
Yeah, Matsui's.
Yeah.
Those are great shears, right? Yeah, they're around $500, $400, but they're a solid shear. They're made out of 440C, I believe. Some of them might be made out of VG10, which is the next material I'll talk about. And VG10 is the second it is a high quality material. So VG10 is an alloy, and I can't remember if it has cobalt in it either, but cobalt is a key word. So for a super high quality shear, they all have cobalt in them. Cobalt is a material that machinists used to use to cut metal before we had carbide. So it's a super, and usually a shear isn't made out of 100% cobalt because, like I said, the harder the material is, the more brittle the shear is. But it's usually an alloy mixed in with some stainless steel and some cobalt and a couple other things. Companies have their own proprietary blend that they do just for marketing for the most part. But VG10 is a material that's been around for a while now with the shear market. My mom, got VG10 shears, the Rusk shears, the Gammas and whatnot back in the day, which they don't make anymore. But those are all VG10 steel, high quality shears. So that's when you start to look into your like $300 range to up to $1,000, right? And the material that my shears are made out of that I carry is so I'm not going to get into Burnell hardness and whatnot because I don't think people will remember that. But our shears, the above shears that I sell, have cobalt in it. So it's AG22 Super Cobalt is what it's called. Anything with cobalt, you don't really have to pay attention to the letters and numbers, and because like I said, everybody's has their own proprietary blend. But what's really cool about above too, the shear brand I carry, is they also give you the Burnell hardness, and Burnell hardness is theirs is about 62 plus or minus 1, roughly. That's one thing you can really look at. A shear that's proud of their brand and the quality of the shear should state the material exactly, and maybe even the Burnell hardness scale.
So what's the ideal number? Is like 62? Like Brunel
Yeah,
means
I'd say low 60s is a really good. That's
and what would be a shitty one?
a shitty one would be in probably mid 50s.
That would mean it's harder or softer.
It'd be softer.
Okay.
So it would be softer, and yeah, I would say mid 50s, I believe, would be a little bit worse. But also the fitment of your shear, right? So that's really materials. Okay, all the shears get hardened. I would really look for forged, and I'd look for some type of cobalt blend.
Years ago, ceramic was popular.
Yeah, and ceramic is a weird material.
It died off, but
Yeah.
I remember it came and went real quick.
Yep, ceramic is a really weird material because it's got the best thermoconductivity, so it doesn't expand in heat. It's one of the highest grade materials that's why it's used in semiconductors, and it's used for parts and that go into your bones for surgeries and whatnot. It's super hard, it's super sharp. Some of my tooling is made out of ceramic or has a ceramic coating. But
essentially, what is ceramic though? It's not a metal, is it?
It's so, in all honesty, I don't really know because I haven't done a whole lot on ceramics.
Yeah.
I don't. The tooling for ceramics in my trade they're way too expensive for me to really dabble in.
Are they even around anymore for shears? Do you ever see a ceramic shear anymore?
Not
Yeah.
really. They might do a ceramic coating, but I've never seen it. You know, it's really it's a hard material to mold and make. So, you know, it's just it can be like metal is a lot more malleable. It's easier to move around and shape compared to ceramic. Ceramic doesn't really shape very well. So it's, you know, you have to bake it and you have to it's just a lot more of a complicated process,
Yeah.
which I can see why they don't want to make shears out of ceramic because of that. There's only like one or two tooling brands in my trade that make ceramic tools. For the most part, it's all made out of carbide. Um, the next thing I'll talk about is, do you have colored shears or do you have silver shears?
Mine are all silver.
All silver. Okay.
Yeah.
So and this is a colored shear. Okay. This is a colored shear. People love colored shears because they're pretty looking. I highly recommend not using colored shears. And the reason I say that is so any color on a shear is a titanium nitride, which doesn't really matter that much. But do you know the difference between a convex edge and a beveled edge?
Not enough to explain what the
Okay.
difference is, but I know I know one's more
Yes.
rounded and one's yeah.
So a convex edge is, I'm going to draw it actually. So a beveled edge is a flat angle. Okay. So a beveled edge is a flat angle. It's used on knives for the most part, and you have two beveled edges that make a point, right? A convex edge is radiused. So I'll see if I can't show you that. Okay, so this is a bevel edge. You see the flat angle,
Yeah.
right? And then this is a convex edge. It kind of rolls and disappears into nothing, and that's your edge. So most Japanese shears are convex edges, right? Your shears, they're silver, they're convexed. What's great about a convex is it can be reconvexed and it's a super smooth cut. The thing about beveled shears, and this is why colored shears I don't necessarily like. I still sell them because people want them, but I always let them know the risks of getting a colored shear. Is you have this flat angle, right? And over time, as you take more and more material off, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Becoming more like a kitchen scissor. And the angle is going to get flatter and flatter and flatter, making it more dull, and it's going to push hair more because you don't want to strip the color off the shear, right? If you convex a colored shear, because you're working the whole face, when you're convexing you're working the whole face of this shear, right? When you're sharpening it, this one I'm only hitting this so the color stays on above, right? And so the shear won't last as long. It won't hold as sharp
Can
of
you convex it if you take some of the paint off? Can you do that?
so yes, you can, but it looks like shit.
Okay.
So
But will it work better?
it will work better.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is, so like I see, and I don't do that because I would rather leave the shear as what it's supposed to be, but I've run across shears where a sharpener does it, and the stylist being, you know, uneducated, I guess you could say uneducated, she wants her shears to look pretty, right? She's pissed. She's pissed that the color got stripped off and this guy came in and took the whole, you know, all the color out of the face and it looks ugly now, because then it's not just like a flat line where the color is there and it's like blended and meshed and kind of gross looking.
Yeah.
So I always just bevel them and leave them how they're supposed to be. I think it's a no-no as a sharpener to do that unless you're completely clear and concise, which most sharpeners aren't, about, hey, would you be open to the idea of this? However, it's going to strip the coloring off and it's not going to look as
Well,
pretty.
even someone listening right now, if you don't like your shears and they are colored and you
Yep.
think they suck, they might just have the wrong edge on them because it might be too old.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just, you know, as that bevel gets bigger and bigger, after 5 sharpenings, you know, your bevel's really big on it. After 5 sharpenings on a convex shear, it still looks relatively the same if it's sharpened correctly. So you just get way more life out of them. You know, and the thing is that a colored shear is the same price as a silver shear. So you might as well, you might as well just get the silver shear, because then it's really a true Japanese style convex edge. Um, yeah. So
So if I'm a stylist right now and I want to find you because I don't like my sharpener and I live in the middle of nowhere, I could ship you shears. How can I find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram, I do most of my business through Instagram. I also have my cell phone number. But my my Instagram is 44 Shears. So that's the brand. This is the logo. It's pretty simple. 44 Shears, and that's my Instagram. You're more than welcome to DM me or get a hold of me via Instagram or Facebook. I have a Google business too, so if you look up 44 Shears, I'm there and you can get my number.
Nice.
The way shipping works for me is there's one of two ways I can do it for people that want to ship their shears to me because they don't have a good local guy they can trust. Is you put in an order through me and I send you a package with a case and a shipping label to return to me. And so you plop your shears in there, you put it in the package and you send it back, and then I'll send it back to you after they're sharpened. Right. The best way is USPS. It's the cheapest way, and it's usually relatively pretty quick. By the time I get the shears, I usually can get them done within 24 hours. So the shipping is obviously going to take the longest. It might take a couple days to get here, a couple days to get back. But once they're in my hands, they get sharpened right away. Another way, if customers are comfortable, they can ship their shears themselves and pay for that cost, and then they get a cheaper price on the shears. And it's only twice I'm shipping them instead of 3 times. Usually it usually ends up going a lot smoother when I just send them a package because it's cut and dry, easy to do. They can throw it in their mailbox, stick the arrow up, and send them out. But it's like $10 more expensive. So if you want the convenience, that's the
It's
way
just easier for the $10.
yep,
Yeah.
that's the way to do it. Also, you know, another thing, and depending on my workload and everything else, I've done it before. I rarely do it. It has to be pretty good circumstance. Is if someone really needs a shear, I can ship them a shear in that package. It will cost more, but if they need a loaner, I'm more than happy to ship them a shear in that case. When I first send it to you, you send me yours, you've got one to use, and then you'll have to ship it 4 times. So then it's even more of a hassle shipping wise, but you won't go without a shear. And then also you get a demo shear, right? You get to check out a shear that you maybe might not have used before, and it could be a good thing, and maybe you want to keep them, after that.
If I want to look at your catalog of shears, do you have them on Instagram? Do you have them on a website yet? Or is
Yep.
that
So the brand I carry is Above. If you send me a DM, I can get you all the information on them. I could get you a catalog. I could get you, it's the website is just Above Shears. The founder of Above, is a pretty interesting cat because he comes from the shear manufacturing world, not the hair industry. Like Sam Villa, right? His
yeah.
shears are because he cuts hair. Um, this guy is named Alex Lee. He's Chinese, so he makes his shears in China. However, with everybody gets kind of a buzzword about China being low quality, right? Well, it really depends because there's so many manufacturers in China. Some people do really good work. Some people do really cheap work, right? Your Louis Vuitton bag is made in China, and then the emblem is stitched on in France, right? Or wherever Louis Vuitton's at.
Yeah.
So there's high quality manufacturing going on there. And with Alex, I trust him because he's from China. So he really knows what he's doing, and he's got really good connections there. He also has a sharpening equipment line called the Kotoku sharpening system, and it's the sharpener that I use. So he makes really, really high quality sharpening tools for shear sharpeners as well. One of the reasons why I picked him is because of that. I've got the best of both worlds, and he does really good work. I've got his number on dial right away. Instead, if I was working with shark fin, right, which I really considered doing, is I've got to go through more hoops. I've got to deal with my wholesaler, and I've got to deal with this. I'm probably never hardly going to talk to the owner about their shears. They're not going to hear my input. They don't really care, which is fine. They're a big company, right? And people love their shears. But yeah, they make a really good. I have a hard time getting, because I can sell shark fins. I have a hard time selling $1,000 shear to a stylist when they can get the same thing for $400.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really hard for me to do that. And maybe people like the shark fins, they like the grip way more because the grip's patented, right? And that's maybe why they can sell them for $1,000. But if you're not concerned about that and you think the ergonomic handle on my shears is more comfortable, like, if you're within the $300 to $600 range, you should get a good quality shear. I anything that's Japanese style, which is almost all shears. Matsui's great, right? Joel makes a good shear. You have to be careful about the fakes of Joel, but Icon makes a good shear. Um, Sharkfin has a good cheaper line. They make an all right shear. Sensei makes a good shear. Sam Via, which I think are around $500, they make a good shear. Definitely a really weird and unique grip on the Sam Vias, but some people really like them. So yeah, I mean, I think if you just stick in that range, you'll do just fine.
So the cool thing is if I'm listening right now, I can just send you my shears or you send me the kit.
Yep.
I try one of these above shears and then
Yep.
sharpen mine if I like it. If I do like the shear, can I just pay you for it
Yep.
once I have it?
For it, and we can talk about what shear you're looking for, and I can send you one, right? I
Cool.
can send the exact type of shear you're looking for because I have a lot of models to choose from. I've got swivels, I've got dry cutters, I've got anywhere from like a 20 tooth to a 40 tooth texturizer. I've got a 7-inch barber line.
On your Instagram, do you break them down for people?
Yeah, so I do in my stories. So I'll every once in a while, like I need to do one on the barber line I just got, which is a 7-inch shear. It's a super long shear. It's weird to me that barbers like them, but a lot of barbers love the super long shear. So if you follow me, you'll get snippets of the different styles of shears that I have and what I carry, what's in
Do you
inventory.
save them to your highlights?
What's that?
Do you save them to your highlights?
No, I do not.
You
I
should.
should. And maybe that's the next thing is I create some highlights. A lot of this is new to me, right? With the I never had social media until I had this business. So, there's so much to learn on that
Yeah.
side.
It's like our yellow pages now.
Right. And no, it
Yeah.
totally is. And where I think I have a really good market is that since Instagram is so oversaturated with stylists and barbers, because everybody has one, I can preach to that community rather than compete with others, which you shouldn't compete with others that are you should be friends, right? But
Yeah.
the reality is everybody's competing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I still have a smaller following, so I think I'm getting up to 700 now, or close to. I'm in the 600s, and
Yeah, but imagine you did 700 shears a month.
right, yeah, sure,
That's great. Yeah. So
yep,
it's a huge following.
and it's totally doable. Right now, so I still have a full-time job as a machinist, which has been awesome. So I work that Monday through Thursday, and then I basically work round clock on social media for my sharpening business.
Nice.
I've with the sharpening, I've already almost replaced my income, because it's just such a good gig that you can really get ahead with it if you know what you're doing and you do good work.
Well, yeah, the nice part is like it's such a necessary service that we need
Yep.
because you use your shears every day and they get dropped, they get dull. And then there's like that one favorite pair of shears that just you don't use anymore because you don't trust a sharpener
Yep.
or you did get them sharpened but you hate them. And so now
Right.
they sit in your pouch and you never use them. So if
Sure.
there is a shear like that you guys have, reach out, send Mason a DM and he'll fix them up for you.
Yeah, please do. I'm more than happy to do that. And I stand by my quality, and every shear is tested 3 different ways before it goes out. So I rarely have any issues with the shears that I sharpen. I guarantee everything for 30 days, even if you ship them. So no questions asked. Even if you drop your shear and accidentally nick it or bend it, I'd resharpen it for free within 30 days. So I want to make sure that my customers and the stylists and barbers that do business with me have their shears for a very long time, and they perform the best they can perform.
All right. So 44 shears on Instagram. Hit up
Yep.
Mason. Mason, thanks a lot for chatting with me. I
Yeah,
learned a
Nick,
lot about shears today. But
awesome.
yeah, I want to take it like a little off brand for today because this is something that a lot of people spend money on,
Yeah.
and they think they have to buy $1,000 pair of shears in order for it to be good, and that's just not the case.
No,
So
it's not. It really isn't. You're paying for the brand at that point.
Yeah.
But the $300 to $500 range is you're going to get a great shear, and you might find a brand that's really small but really takes pride in their craftsmanship, and that's where you want to be. Because to them, you're not just a number or a sale. You're actually, a good paying customer, and you can build a really good relationship with that company for the rest of your life.
Awesome.
So, okay.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, of
For the
course.
rest of your day. Yeah.
Hey,
Hope you had a good lunch.
all right.
All right. See you
Bye.
later. All right, everyone. I will. James,
Yeah.
we're all set, brother. Everyone, hope you enjoy the live.
You want questions?
You got Q&As?
Not many, but a couple.
Yeah. Is it for Mason? Because he just got off.
Nick, thanks for this. What a nice guy. We got Nick. I'm a former private practice doctor office. The layout is a waiting room reception area, which my partner will do blowouts herself, and 4 rooms we want to rent out. I'm in New Jersey. How do? Nothing to do with the conversation
Cheers.
today.
That's right. Shoot me a DM. I'll answer that in the DMs. And then,
the hair mechanics, what kind of shear are they?
yeah, we'll wrap it up, James.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, cool. All right, guys, if you have questions on shears, message Mason, 44 shears. And then if you got a question on business, shoot me a DM. See you later.